Listen to this carefully. If you are on SSI, this is one of the most important weeks for you for this entire week and really in the entire year, because in just a matter of days, right here in mid-January 2026, we're expecting a major federal announcement that directly affects your monthly benefits, your eligibility for other programs, and the future of SSI itself. And here's the part that should get your attention. This announcement isn't about rumors, it isn't about political noise, and it isn't something you can ignore. It's about the federal poverty line for 2026. And that number quietly controls almost everything tied to SSI. So stay with me, because once you see the math, you'll understand why SSI beneficiaries have been left behind for decades and why this week actually matters more than most people realize. So let's talk about why SSI is a good program, but it still fails the people. All right. So here's the truth, and no one wants to say it out loud, but SSI was created as an anti poverty program. But today, it's become a guaranteed poverty program. So about 7.5 million Americans rely on SSI. And despite doing everything right, meeting strict income limits, strict asset limits, strict reporting rules, most SSI recipients are still forced to live below the poverty line. And that's not an accident. That's actually a policy failure. And it did not happen overnight. So here was the original promise of SSI and how this all started, right? So when SSI was created in the early 1970s under Richard Nixon, the goal was simple. If you are elderly, disabled, blind, you have limited income, and you should not be forced to rely on friends, family, or charity just to survive. So the SSI benefits were supposed to stay aligned with the federal poverty line. It's supposed to be equal, side by side, in step, and that was the promise. But that promise has been broken for over 50 years now. So this week's big announcement as it relates to the federal poverty line for 2026 is going to be huge. And that's what you could expect coming out this week. So the federal government is expected to make this official announcement for the federal poverty line for 2026. And the reason why this matters is because SSI benefits were designed to track this number, but they don't anymore. So let's look at the most recent confirmed data for the 2025 federal poverty line. So for an individual, it's going to be 15,650. Household of two, that's going to be 21,150. And here's what most projections show for 2026. Individuals is currently 16,430 approximately. For a household of two people, approximately is about 22,200. So estimated 4% increase, closer to 5% increase as relates to this. And that is a huge jump. And unfortunately, SSI did not keep up with this jump. And this is what's so shocking about this. The maximum SSI benefit for an individual was $967 per month. So that means SSI benefits were 34.85% below the federal poverty line. So let that sink in. Almost 35% below that level defines poverty. That's not even a safety net. That's a shortfall. And in 2026, the max SSI benefit is now going to be $994 per month. But the poverty line is moving higher again, which means the gap likely stays around the same or even worse. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. In 2025, the SSI would have needed to increase by $337 per month just to reach the poverty line. So here's a question. Would an extra $337 per month have changed your life? Maybe you can't get a mansion. Maybe you can't do anything luxurious. But the reality of it is it's enough for food every month. And it can make an impact for many, many people relying on these benefits. That could also mean heat in the winter, AC in the summer. All of these things contribute to your current living expenses. For some people, that might even cover things like car insurance that could be paid, maybe a repair handled without having to panic as relates to taking care of that. So maybe even living alone instead of depending on family members to be able to take care of you. So, of course, that is why this is so important. So be honest when it relates to this. Drop a yes or no in the comments if it would make an impact for you, because lawmakers need to hear this. And this number affects more than just SSI. And this part is probably the most important part that a lot of people miss. And what people don't understand, this is critical, is that the federal poverty line doesn't just affect SSI. All right, it quietly controls who qualifies for a long list of other programs that millions of low-income Americans rely on just to get by. So we're talking about programs like Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. So this is going to be your food money. In most states, eligibility is capped at 130% of the federal poverty line. So when the poverty line goes up, but your income doesn't, your real buying power goes down, even if you still technically qualify. It also impacts the low income home energy assistance program, right? This helps keep the heat on in the winter and the lights on year round. And many states use 100% to 150% of the poverty line as the cutoff for that. So if SSI stays flat while energy costs rise, people are forced to choose between heat and food. It also impacts temporary assistance for needy families. So this program heavily relies on the poverty line data to be able to determine who qualifies. Even small changes in the federal poverty number can push people out or reduce their benefits without their income even actually improving. It also impacts housing assistance programs. So Section 8, public housing and local rentals help use poverty-based formulas. So rents go up, the poverty line goes up, SSI stays behind, and that gap turns into housing instability. Medicaid expansions and cost sharing protections. Many states base eligibility on 138% of the federal poverty line. So the higher the poverty line goes, the more obvious it becomes that SSI income is not enough to be able to meet basic health needs. And here's the key takeaway. Most of these programs use 100% or 130% of the federal poverty line as the measuring stick. So when poverty line rises, but SSI does not, people move forward, they don't end up moving forward. They end up losing ground, not on paper, but in real life. So why are lawmakers actually watching this very closely? Now, here's why this matters in Washington. So lawmakers already know that this gap exists, and that's why multiple proposals, including the SSI Restoration Act, all point to the same solution. Raise the SSI benefits to at least the federal poverty line again. And that's not radical. That was just the way it was originally intended to be. And here's why every annual poverty line increase matters so much. Every time the poverty line goes up and SSI doesn't follow, the argument for reform gets stronger and the math becomes harder to ignore. The failure becomes easier to prove and the pressure on lawmakers increases. And this is no longer about small adjustments. It's about hundreds of dollars per month, not just pennies. So this does make an impact, and this really does help a lot of people who need it. So here's what happens next. So you want to make sure you pay attention this week. So the official federal poverty line announcement for 2026 is expected this week. Once it's released, 3 things happen immediately. So we'll know the exact 2026 poverty numbers, no projections, no guesses. It's going to be real data. We'll see how wide the SSI gap really is, exactly how far SSI falls below that number that defines poverty, and we'll know how strong the case is for reform once we get these numbers. So this number will be used in hearings, proposals, and policy arguments moving forward. And the moment that these numbers are official, well, I'm going to be breaking it down and sharing with you what you need to know. So make sure you go ahead and subscribe, share this with someone who could benefit from this, and I'll see you in the next one.